So an unusual mission for you. Is it simply a case of all hands on deck?
It certainly is. Not only is the Westpac Lifesaver going to be busy right through the night, but we've also activated 2 offshore rescue boats for the Sandy Point fire down up Georges River. All the roads have been blocked off. The fire front is still approaching them, so we're going to use the offshore rescue boats, local rubber duckies, as well as water police to evacuate people from that location.
And Stephen, is one of those firefighting helicopters at work in this area?
Firefighting helicopters are all over the whole of Sydney at the moment, flat out. We know that a number of helicopters are in the area. Nevertheless, the smoke is increasing. The turbulence created by the heat, as well as the windy conditions, is making life very difficult for the pilots. So a number of them have been grounded. Now we're going to have to continue monitoring that right through the night.
It sounds like a scary few hours ahead, Stephen. Is there any hope now? I know we were expecting a cool change earlier, but that didn't seem to amount to much. At
this stage, just looking at the weather radar at the moment, we're not going to see this front for a little while. It's still blustering here at the helicopter base. You know, the windsock is right at 90 degrees, so the winds are still quite strong.
All right, Stephen Lay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The government appears unlikely to accept recommendations made by a Senate committee to soften the proposed ASIO bill, giving Australian spies greater powers to deal with suspected terrorists. Attorney General, as we can see there, streets have been blocked off by police, residents being turned away. Clearly, the danger is simply too great as people wait for information to find out exactly what is happening near their homes. We know that fire has broken out near the Holsworthy Army Base in Sydney's south, which is in fact threatening the military facility there. Huge smoke plumes in the background there showing just how close that fire is coming to residential areas, and all sorts of emergency services on scene. We know that the Surf Life-Saving Rescue helicopter is actually being called in to try to winch those injured firemen and others out of that fire area at Glenorrhy, and we will of course be bringing you those pictures as they come to us here at Sky News, and more information as it comes to hand. We do understand at least one home has been lost in these fires so far. We're actually getting reports now that several homes have been lost. We can't tell you exactly how many or exactly where they are, but of course if you stay with us on Sky News, we will bring you the information as we can get it. You can see from these pictures that the smoke is very thick. That's going to be causing problems on the roads, no doubt, as well. Everybody would no doubt be warned to take it very easy. Conditions are atrocious for firefighters. Strong, blustery winds blowing that smoke all across the suburbs of Sydney this afternoon. We are talking 60 bushfires in and around the Sydney metropolitan area. Some of the worst affected areas include Barton Ridge, Glenfield, Wattle Grove and Maroota. Other suburbs affected: Thornlea, Homebush, Cowan, Glenorrhy, Terry Hills, Menai, Glenwood and Liverpool. Losing those pictures there, unfortunately, but we are bringing them to you live. This information just coming to us now. Breaking news on bushfires in the Sydney area. We know that at least 7 people have been injured in a fire at Glenorrhy this afternoon. They are currently being treated on the scene, and the Surf Life-Saving Rescue chopper is there to winch them to safety and to hospital for treatment. We also know that an emergency has been declared in the Sutherland Shire. The district of Campbelltown is under threat, also the districts of Hornsby and Baulkham Hills. We can confirm at least one home has been lost. We understand there may have been damage to other houses.
Across the city to the north and south, teams of firefighters are battling to control an astonishing 30 fires which have been driven by soaring temperatures. At this stage, what we know is at least one home has been destroyed, with dozens more injured. The worst of the fires near Glenfield and Wattle Grove in the southwest, and at Maroota and Glenorrhy in the northwest of the city.
The trail of smoke that drifted across the city told the story. It led to an intense blaze at the Holsworthy Army Base. Fierce flame drove back fire crews. Hectare after hectare went up. Bush that hasn't seen decent rain in months seemed to explode into flame. It generated an enormous column of smoke that billowed kilometres into the sky. Flames not only licked at the army base, they bore down on the new housing estate of Wattle Grove. It was here fire crews held the line. Scores of tightly packed homes were in the path of the blaze. One house in Eclipse Circuit was already on fire when crews tried to save it.
I've evacuated this street, but I haven't done this one. I've done all this one.
While there were no forced evacuations, many people opted to leave voluntarily. Families fled several streets in Wattle Grove as the thick smoke filled the air. At Glenorrey, northwest of Sydney, a rescue helicopter was called in to airlift 5 firemen and 2 civilians who were trapped by the blaze there. The fire was pushed along by a 50 to 70 km/h westerly. In nearby Maruta, 250 homes are under threat. 30 fire trucks have been called in to help save them. Earlier, fire damaged a substation at Homebush, creating what officials called power dips across Sydney. All city rail trains are affected. Commuters are being asked to delay their trip home.
The Westpac Lifesaver Rescue Chopper is on the ground in Glenorrey to winch out of bushland 7 people believed injured in the fires. Stephen Lee now joins me. Stephen, what's the latest?
Yeah, good evening, John. Well, it's good news. And initial reports told us that there were 2 civilians and 5 firefighters seriously injured up there. The good news is that our medical teams have inspected these guys, have treated them. They're all stable. There is one person that our medical team is still with at the moment, but we probably won't have to transport anyone. Now, unfortunately, we're being kept in the area because there is a person missing in the fire zone. Early information coming to hand at this stage has requested that the Lifesaver helicopter stay on the scene while a search is being carried out for this missing person.
Yeah, Stephen, good news for the 5 firefighters and 2 civilians, but how difficult is it for the chopper in these sorts of conditions?
Well, it's absolutely difficult at the moment. We've got, even as we speak, we've still got westerly winds up to 35 knots in the Sydney area at the moment. A lot of the firebombing helicopters have been grounded because of the intense smoke, the intense heat and the turbulence that is being created by these fires. So it's making life quite difficult. We've landed at Glenorrey. We're going to stay there until the search is completed. And then we'll hopefully make our way home and stay on standby overnight. And
will you be able to get out of the area, Stephen?
At this stage we will be. The Lifesaver helicopter is certainly equipped for this, and this is our bread and butter to be able to respond in emergency, so that's why we're there. We've got no doubt that once this person is located, we'll be heading back into Sydney and start working with the other fire zones.
And as for the person you mentioned still injured, are they able to be treated on the ground, or will you need to drop them off at a hospital?
Well, at this point, the Lifesaver medical crews, the doctor and the paramedic, have treated this patient. Quite stable indeed, there's no doubt about that. We won't be transporting at this point. Nevertheless, we also have road ambulances and police in the area that can assist if that patient needs to be transported. We've got beds already available at Concord Hospital and Royal North Shore Hospital, all ready to go for burns victims should they be required.
Great work, Stephen. Thanks for your time again.
Thanks, John.
And joining me now from the New South Wales Ambulance Service Media Unit is Mika Bailey from the Rural Fire Service. Mika, thank you for joining us.
Not a problem.
And what's the latest from Ambos?
From the Rural Fire Service, we're continuing to work on these fires around the Glenorrey area. There's property protection being done around Peebles Road and Bloodwood Road, Arcadia at the moment, and it's very good news to hear that the firefighter injuries were not as substantial as initially thought. Firefighters are our main source of operations out there, and they're a vital tool, so we're very, very happy to hear about that.
Absolutely, Mika. What about conditions at the moment and in the early part of this evening? Are they getting worse or better?
Conditions remain quite horrific for firefighters out there, and we're not anticipating changes at the moment, although we're hopeful that the conditions may change as nightfall comes. But we continue to put resources into these areas to make sure that properties are protected.
Mika Bailey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, one of the areas under threat was Wattle Grove in Sydney's southwest, and joining me now on the line, Wattle Grove resident Peter Peters. Thank you for joining us, Peter.
Thank you, John.
And what's it like at your home?
Well, at the moment, things are a bit calmer down in my street, which is Wallcliffe Court, where the house at the end of our street was lost. The fires seem to have started down in that area. I wasn't home at the time, but my husband, who's normally calm, cool and collected, rang me frantic to get home. And it was rather frightening because it was just billowing and, coming along the M5, it didn't look very good. But apparently the flames just came up over the two houses at the end of our street because it's a cul-de-sac that ends in the bush. Then it came along the side fences, which we all back or side onto. And yes, and it was all closed. I managed to sneak in the back way, and but there's been spot fires with embers and that all over Wattle Grove. A lot of the brushwood fences have all caught alight, and as far as it's all in the Holsworthy land, which is adjacent to us. So it's all been really frightening, but. Yeah, so...
Do you feel as though the immediate threat in Wattle Grove has subsided, or is it still dangerous?
In my area it is, although I was just out the front and one of my neighbours has come home, so they've let her in. So it sounds like they might be a little bit more confident that things have settled down, but I haven't, all the police and fire have moved, people have moved from our area to other areas of Wattle Grove, including my husband, so I really don't know where, how we stand from where I am, only that we're just, it's just all smoky, and we seem to be okay here at the moment. It seems to have passed over us and have moved on further along towards, the Engadine, towards that area in the Holsworthy bush.
Peter Peters, glad to hear you're safe and well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
On to other news now. Thousands of people in outback South Australia are anxiously counting down this evening's total eclipse of the sun, weather permitting.
Which is right behind me there. The smoke is so dense across this area, and I'm sure you can still see the wind is incredibly strong. We're still talking winds of up to 40 kilometres an hour and more, and certainly that's making conditions so tough for firefighters. Earlier, the blaze started in Maroota. It's made its way through Glenorrey and this region here in the easterly direction, with that strong westerly just proving so tough for firefighters. It's now created two spot fires just north of Arcadia. There are little townships, Birrelly, Figmelton, down towards Barara Waters, which are also in the line of fire, and certainly now property protection is the priority up here in the northwest.
Yes, Kieran, we've reported 15 homes. Any danger of more?
Well, that's the 15 homes is what I understand at the moment, and I understand it's pretty much from the blaze, that thick smoke from right behind us. There are dozens of crews in this area working overtime. There are plenty of aircraft, 67 across the state, and I hazard to guess there are plenty of those up in this area. It is certainly a very, very tough conditions up here for the firefighters, and things aren't going to get worse. The forecast in this area and across the Sydney Basin are for westerly winds, and for those westerly winds to continue. And when the winds are coming through that airstream, we know that keeps humidity at a very low level. And I understand humidity at the moment is still only 10%, temperatures up around 30 degrees. So conditions couldn't be any worse, John.
Kieran, we'll leave you there for the moment. We'll stay in touch with you, and we'll leave the Sydney bushfires just for a moment to take you to live coverage now of the total eclipse of the sun in South Australia. You're seeing live pictures of the eclipse as it happens. Joining me now in the studio, Sky and Space Magazine's Jonathan Nally. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. And what are we seeing at this very moment?
We're seeing the moon orbiting the Earth and getting in the way between the Earth and the sun. So it's really quite remarkable. The sun just happens to be 400 times further away than the moon is, and it's 400 times bigger. So when they line up, the moon covers up the sun just exactly.
So that crescent that we see is not the moon. In fact, it is the sun.
That's right.
And dare I say it, we'll even lose that crescent in a few moments' time.
That's right. At about 10 minutes past 8 Eastern Time, 7:40 Central Time, that will all be completely covered up for 33 seconds.
Jonathan, how long does the whole process take? Clearly we're now coming almost to the very end of obscuring the sun. But
that's right, yeah. Basically, if you were right in the middle of the eclipse path that would have started about an hour ago, you get to the middle of the eclipse, which we're coming up to in a few minutes' time, and then about an hour to finish.
And in fact, as we're watching it live from Ceduna in South Australia, we're seeing that crescent getting more narrow. Now, that wouldn't be a shot through as if you were looking with the natural eye. There'd be a filter there, wouldn't there?
That's correct. That camera would have a filter on to cut down the glare a bit, and of course we must make the point that people should not use the naked eye or any sort of optical aid to look at it.
Which is exactly the point I wanted to make. Even when it's in this slight crescent form, you mustn't stare at it. You use special glasses.
That's correct. Even though the visible light that you see might not be that dangerous, the invisible stuff you can't see will damage your eye, may blind you.
Jonathan, a little bit of technical stuff about what's going on. How often does the moon get in the way of in between the Earth and the Sun?
These happen every year, these eclipses, but it happens in a different part of the world, so it's quite rare to get one in Australia. The last one was 1976, which went through Gippsland down in Victoria. I remember when I was very young at the time, I was a schoolboy, and I remember that one as well. The next one will be the year 2012, and people up in the far north of the Northern Territory and Northern Queensland will see that one. And then, in fact, where this one is going through South Australia will be almost an exact copy of it in the year 2030.
Jonathan, we're probably more familiar with lunar eclipses, where the sun casts its shadow across the moon. Why are these more rare?
Well, what happens with a lunar eclipse is when the Earth casts its shadow onto the moon, you can see that from anywhere on Earth, because the Earth, you're standing on the Earth and your shadow is being cast onto the moon. This one, the moon's shadow is very small and it only goes across a certain part of the Earth, so you've got to be on that certain part of the Earth to see it. Not everyone will see it.
So, dare I say that astrologers all over the world, astronomers rather, will be, yes, forgive me, astronomers all over the world, all eyes on South Australia, because this is such a rare occurrence?
Oh, that's exactly right. Many people are eclipse nuts, basically. They just love eclipses, and people who've been to one and seen one of these things in the flesh say there is absolutely nothing like it, and you get the bug, and you want to go and see every eclipse possible. Now, many eclipses are in inaccessible places. The next one will occur down in Antarctica next year, so not many people are going to get to that. So if you can come to a place like Australia, where it's easy to get to, good infrastructure and everything, come here and see an easy eclipse.
Yeah. Now let's
you can see how much it's really eating into the sun there.
That's right, and I'm just hearing now information that we've got 1 minute until totality. What will happen in totality, and how long will it stay in totality?
Well, in totality, that little ring will go, the moon will be completely covered up, and we may start to see the sun's outer atmosphere, the corona. When that really bright bit's covered up, we may see the sort of wispy, cloudy area around it, although I don't know how it'll be affected by this camera that's being used. And then 33 seconds later, when it finishes, we might see the diamond ring effect, where the thin crescent comes back and a burst of sunlight may come through a valley on the moon, and we see this big burst of light. It's really beautiful. It
will be beautiful, and no doubt we'll see. Now, that crescent is really starting to get small. We just saw a cutaway of a couple of people watching it.
That's right.
Clearly having been instructed to wear those glasses.
Use special filter glasses. You can see the moon there moving in its orbit around the Earth, and it's covering up the sun. That's the actual moon moving in its orbit around the Earth, and only a few seconds away.
Jonathan, we're going to get totality in 10 seconds. Now, here goes that ring. If you've just joined us, this is the solar eclipse taking place in South Australia.
Bingo. Now, that is the corona. That is the sun's outer atmosphere that we don't normally see because the bright part of the sun covers it up. And there they're trying to focus in on some solar flares. That red bit you can see on the top right-hand corner, that's solar flares and prominences spurting out from the edge of the sun. And those red bits that you just caught a glimpse of, they are many, many times larger than the Earth.
And, Jonathan, we're obviously hearing cheering from the many thousands of people who have gone to the one-horse town of Ceduna, especially for this.
It's worked out beautifully, hasn't it? They were worried about the weather, but it's turned out a beautiful occasion for them.
And we must stress we're shooting through a filter here. In fact, it's daylight in Ceduna.
There's the diamond ring.
What a fantastic...
That's the diamond ring. See how the effect is?
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't that beautiful?
Now, that's obviously nature and the Earth and a bit of cloud in there playing light tricks with us all at the moment.
That's right, yeah.
And I wanted to make the point that it's still daylight in South Australia, so they've had the effect of going into darkness for a period of time.
That's right, now coming out of darkness as well. Isn't that beautiful?
It really is. Jonathan, just to recap, since we've seen the pictures of it, when are we going to see the next one for those who are captivated, want to go to it?
Well, if you want to go to the Antarctica next year, if you can get on a boat or something, you can go down and see that one. The next one from Australia will catch the end of one in the year 2012. There'll be another one in the year 2028, and then 2030, so a little way to wait yet.
Jonathan Nelly, thank you for sharing a truly unique moment with us.
It's been great, thank you.
Thank you. And that's where we'll leave our coverage of the solar eclipse, and we'll update the headlines coming up next with a preview of tonight's Sky Business also after the break. And we'll continue.
15 homes lost in Glenorrey. That brings the total of homes we believe to be lost at this time 19. That's 2 at Alfred's Point, 1 at Sandy Point, 1 at Wattle Grove, and those 15 at Glenorrey. Certainly rural fire services are telling us that conditions are still unpredictable, and also that they're now beginning to come into a phase of assessment, so that we'll be learning more about how the fires have affected certain areas. At the At the beginning of the blazes, obviously, it was certainly a case of just protecting as many homes as possible, getting any information back to these headquarters here, not so important, but now into a phase of assessment, so we should be learning more about which areas have been affected and where most homes have been lost.
Jennifer, I know it's been all hands on deck at Rose Hill where you are there at Rural Fire Headquarters. It's the day in many respects that they've been dreading, isn't it?
It certainly is, and we know that Commissioner Phil Koperberg is now going to Glenorrey to offer his support and to meet some of the families who are still in the area. Of course, many people took the choice to be evacuated, however some decided to stay and try to protect their homes. It's a very confused situation, as I said before, certainly because the focus has been purely on firefighting, purely on protecting those homes. So we're now just starting to have the information filter back that 15 has been lost more, and I certainly couldn't say that will be the limit for the night. We may well go past this mark of 19, well above 20.
That's right, Jennifer, because the winds are still blowing strong. We'll come back to you shortly when and if that figure changes. Meantime, I'd like to cross now to Glenorrey, one of the other major fire hotspots, where Sky News reporter Kieran Gilbert is standing by. Kieran, what's the latest where you are?
John, things are just looking terrible, mate. I understand 15 homes have gone. There were fears earlier in the piece that a fire crew of 4 were in major trouble. Thankfully, news has come through that they're okay. But 2 firefighters injured, one with a broken limb, the other with burns. I don't have any information at hand as to the serious, the nature of those burns, but certainly dozens and dozens of crews on the line here this evening fighting blazes in conditions which couldn't be any worse. To be honest, the winds haven't died down at all. You thought with the going down of the sun that certainly the temperatures would have dropped a little bit, but they're still in the high 20s, and the forecast is for milder conditions tomorrow, but still for westerly winds, which will keep humidity low, and certainly the fight is going to continue for some time to come.
Yes, indeed, it looks that way, Kieran. We've just been speaking with Jennifer Caldwell at Rural Fire Headquarters in Rose Hill, and apparently it's not going to be an easy night for firefighters. You mentioned the 4 injured. No doubt there are dozens, if not hundreds, in the field trying to put these fires out.
Absolutely, and dozens of aircraft as well, 67 across the state and plenty of them up here. Every now and then you see these lights coming through the thick smoke that has engulfed the northwest of Sydney, and that is one of the many aircraft that have been reloading with buckets at the Glenorrey field just down the road here on the Old Northern Road in Sydney's northwest, and then going out for another mission of trying to contain some of these blazes. The blaze started in Maroota, it's moved down through Glenorrey and jumped the Old Northern Road, and there are a number of small townships, Birrallee, a few others down towards Barara Waters, which are now in the line of the fire, and certainly property management and containment of those fires are certainly the biggest priority here at the moment. I understand the Commissioner, Phil Koperberg, is going to be in the area shortly to give an update, but as you mentioned, up to 15 homes lost, possibly more, and conditions not looking like they're going to get better anytime soon.
Kieran, it's fairly dark behind you from what we can see. We can see some burning going on in the background. Maybe if you could describe for us, set the scene there, because the sun has gone down. Normally, as you say, it would be cooler, but it isn't. The winds are still blowing. What is it that we see in the background there?
Well, what we've got is just a huge plume of thick smoke coming out from that blaze, which is the blaze that has claimed so many of those homes that we were talking about. And the wind is, you could see the strength of the wind simply by looking at the smoke and the pace with which that is going across this Sydney sky. It is just an amazing sight. We heard the talk of the eclipse before. This is nature at its worst. It really has just been ferocious up here today, John. In the last couple of minutes, I can tell you there were dozens of emergency vehicles flying up to add support. You can hear one as we speak now. It's a scene of complete. It's a bushfire emergency as it's been declared. I can also tell you that the local residents and local community have really got behind people in this area. The Glenorrey RSL Club is in full mode, providing services to people that have had to leave their homes. And there's another issue: plenty of people can't get to their homes in outlying areas because so many of these roads are blocked due to the blaze. And we know earlier it crossed this main arterial, the Old Northern Road, and certainly police emergency services are not willing to allow people to go anywhere near this blaze, particularly with conditions the way they are.
And Kieran, given where you are, and I appreciate it might be difficult, have you got an idea of the number of evacuations?
There are dozens. We don't have an exact number, but certainly we could say dozens. I spoke to someone down at the Glenorrey RSL Club earlier in the piece, and she said that there are dozens of people there looking for refuge. They were all out on the street just thinking about what could be, and for some what has been. Certainly a terrible afternoon in Sydney, and the northwest has copped a fair bit of the brunt of that of the bushfires today.
Kieran Gilbert in Glenorrey. Of course, we will stay in touch with you through the course of the evening and get updates from you in the field there. Also, we have Jennifer Caldwell standing by at Rural Fire Service headquarters in Rose Hill. We'll be checking with her as well for you, especially for those of you living in those areas affected by these bushfires. Let me add that fires are burning under high voltage transmission lines, which have caused dips in the system throughout Sydney this evening, power dips that is, and it has severely affected the electricity supply. Problems have forced John Farnham, for example, to postpone tonight's scheduled The Last Time concert, which was to have been held at Sydney's Entertainment Centre. Joining me on the line now to tell us a little bit more about the energy dips, Energy Australia's Phil Neate. Thank you for joining us, Phil.
Good evening, John.
Why have we been losing power around Sydney?
What we've had is the bushfires burning under the major transmission towers in the southwest and to the west of the city, and that's under the transmission lines operated by Energy Australia and Transgrid. The threat in those areas has now eased. That's why we were experiencing the situation earlier this evening and this afternoon when we had the dips in the system. What that was happening at the time was that the protection system was working. In other words, it was making sure that the power was not cut to customers and that we were using our systems to protect the integrity of the supply. That threat is now eased, but what we have now is a few localised problems in some suburban areas of Sydney, which has been caused by wind damage, and we've got crews in the area working at the moment. In relation to those events that have been cancelled this evening, one of the things people have got to remember is that when the dips were being experienced this afternoon is that the internal protection systems on the energy supply systems in those venues did trip out.
Right, so Phil, just to get it straight, because people thought they were power surges, they were quite the opposite.
They were dips on the system caused by low voltage.
And did homes lose power as well?
We only had one small interruption in the Drummoyne area, and that was only for 1 minute, but other than that, the supply system operated by Energy Australia and Transgrid held up very, very well indeed.
And I understand one of the railway stations in the centre of Sydney had to be evacuated.
I believe that was only because of the low voltage situation. They did this as a safety precaution.
But in the course of the evening, Phil, can we take it that the energy situation will even out again and come back to normal?
We would hope so, but as I said, we've got crews working in some localised areas. We also experienced some problems in the Central Coast and also in the Hunter region. There's been severe windstorms going through the Hunter this afternoon, so we're still trying to reconnect customers in Scone and Mossbrook and Singleton and Maitland areas at this stage.
Phil, to wrap it up, what advice can you give residents tonight to make your job easier and that on the power system?
Just tell them that we're totally on top of things, and it does take time for the crews to get into those areas to do the repairs, plus the fact that we're also got to go through the safety checks before we do reconnect supply.
OK, Phil Neate from Energy Australia, thank you for joining us and bringing us up to date on that. Phil Neate. And we're going to bring you up to date now on another big story happening in Australia, in South Australia in fact, and that is the full, total solar eclipse, which has been taking place over the past few minutes, and I have Sky and Space Magazine's John Nally here with me, and John, a remarkable occurrence and a rare one at that.
It is. It's quite not funny, but it's sad actually. We see this juxtaposition of earthly fires and a celestial fire. It's horrible on the ground here, but it's amazing up there in the sky.
Yes, one